तो आप कहना क्या चाहते हो पापा कि मैं अमेरिका नहीं जाऊं?
मेरे चाहने से कोई फर्क पड़ता है? तुमने कभी कोई बात मेरी मानी है?
फर्क पड़ता है, पर आप चाहते हो कि मैं नहीं जाऊं तो पहले कह देते।
Think about the last time you had a conversation with your father. Was it easy or did it feel like crossing an invisible barrier? A father and son in India share a bond that is both rigid and fragile. Duty binds them and love lingers between them, but understanding often eludes them. The father is a figure of authority, a man of few words and heavy expectations. He provides, protects, and corrects, but rarely expresses. The son grows up in a shadow, torn between seeking approval and breaking free. Their conversations are brief, their silences long. Yet, beneath the distance, there is love, complicated and unspoken. It is in the sacrifices never mentioned, the glances of pride, the grudging respect that deepens with time. By the time the son truly understands his father, he has already become him. This slow unraveling of roles where a son finds himself taking care of a man who once seemed invincible sits at the heart of the Mehta Boys, Boman Irani's directorial debut. The film is not just about generational friction, it is about the reluctant exchange of care. Shiv Mehta, a widowed father, clings to his independence while his son Amay struggles with the weight of responsibility. They are two men locked in a quiet battle, one who is resisting the reality of aging and the other is resisting the burden of stepping up. The film paints their wounds without prescribing easy healing, allowing love to emerge not in some huge gestures but in the spaces between conflict and quiet understanding. Indian cinema has long explored the father-son dynamic to reveal its multiple shades: adoration, rebellion, estrangement, and reconciliation. In Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, it is a tale of rigid authority clashing with personal choice, while Baghban flips the script, showing an aging father abandoned by the very children he raised. Masoom explores the delicate relationship between a father and his illegitimate son, forcing him to reconcile love with guilt and responsibility, while Udaan lays bare the scars of generational trauma. The Malayalam classic Kiridam is a heartbreaking tale of a father's shattered dreams as he watches his son, once full of promise, get pulled into a tragic cycle of violence. And then, of course, we have something what can only be referred to as the Ranbir Kapoor Daddy Issues cinematic universe, in which Kapoor's characters wrestle with father figures. They are absent, overbearing, or impossible to please. Kapoor has almost unknowingly built a body of work that revolves around paternal wounds, and that can be a video in its own. But in this video, let's try to unpack the roots of the father-son conflict in Indian cinema and how it has evolved with time. At the heart of a father-son relationship is an inevitable rift, a generational gap. It is not just a difference in years, but a clash of values, priorities, and the very definition of success. Fathers, shaped by struggle and sacrifice, expect their sons to follow that same path of duty, while sons, raised in a rapidly changing world, seek personal freedom and self-expression. The father, who is a product of scarcity, believes in stability, whereas the son, who is raised in abundance, searches for meaning in his life. This divide is often silent, manifesting in disappointment, resentment, or simply misunderstanding. This kind of disconnect is also seen in ambition and identity. Fathers struggle to understand careers that exist beyond traditional frameworks. In Tamasha, the protagonist's father expects stability while his son longs for creative freedom. The conflict is not just about a job, but it is about how each generation perceives fulfillment. Technology has only widened this gap. In #Home, a father's inability to navigate the digital world isolates him from his tech-savvy son, who is too absorbed in his phone to notice that his father is yearning for connection. Once a father who was his son's guide to the world, today is an outsider in his own home. Social media that was once meant to bridge distances has instead deepened them. Sons seek validation from an online audience, no longer measuring their worth by their father's approval. What was once a generational gap in ideology is now a gulf in communication itself, as if they no longer speak the same language. Now, few conflicts are as emotionally charged as those between fathers and sons, especially when love becomes the battleground. Indian cinema has explored this tension where a father who is a custodian of tradition clashes with son who seeks to assert his own individuality. In Mughal Azam, Akbar's resistance to Prince Salim's love for the courtesan Anarkali is not just about royal protocol, it is about power. For Akbar, love is a destabilizing force, a weakness that could shatter the empire's foundation. His refusal is as much about protecting the throne as it is about protecting his son from what he sees as a ruin. Decades later, we have Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum that repackaged this theme in a modern setting. Yash Raichand disowns his son Rahul for marrying beneath his social class, believing that love must adhere to the boundaries of status and tradition. In both films, love is not merely personal, but it is political, an act of defiance against an established order. Yet, beneath their rigidity, fathers are not villains. Their resistance is driven by fear, the fear of losing control, of losing their sons, of watching the world shift beyond their grasp. What they fail to realize, however, is that their very attempt to hold on is pushing their sons further away from them. Salim wages a full-fledged rebellion against Akbar while Rahul chooses exile, carrying the wound of his father's rejection. The psychological conflict is stark. The fathers love their sons deeply, but they love them on their own terms. The sons, in turn, crave for love and autonomy, but the price of one often means sacrificing the other. Ultimately, both Akbar and Yash bend, but only after suffering the consequences of their obstinacy. Akbar, despite his absolute authority, chooses to spare Anarkali's life, but ensures that she is separated from Salim forever, imposing his will even in this moment of mercy. His love remains conditional, bound to his duty as a ruler. Yash, on the other hand, finally embraces Rahul, realizing that control is not love, but acceptance is. These films expose a universal truth. Paternal love, when stripped of ego and expectations, is all about letting go and not holding on. The tragedy of how long it takes for fathers and sons to arrive at this understanding is something that we get to notice in films. Family is the first structure of belonging that a child knows, and when this structure of belonging starts seeing some cracks through separation, divorce, or even emotional abandonment, it leaves an imprint that lasts forever. For a child, the absence of a father creates a specific kind of void, one that is filled with confusion, resentment, and the unconscious search for validation. In Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, Imran faces an existential crisis. Having been raised by his stepfather, he eventually discovers that his biological father, Salman, not only left but never wanted to be a parent. The moment of confrontation between Imran and Salman is one of the most powerful depictions of father-son alienation in Indian cinema. Salman is unapologetic, indifferent even, forcing Imran to confront the hardest truth of all, that not all absences are tragic, some are simply choices. The psychological devastation of this realization is immense. For Imran, it is not just about losing a father, it is about realizing that his very existence was an inconvenience to the man who created him. His story is not about seeking reconciliation, but about finding closure within himself. In Kapoor and Sons, separation takes a different form. Harsh is physically present but emotionally distant, trapped in an unhappy marriage with Sunita. His strained relationship with his sons, Arjun and Rahul, is the byproduct of years of unresolved marital discord. The separation here is not legal but emotional. A family still together, yet completely fractured. Arjun, much like Imran and ZNMD, carries resentment, feelings like the lesser-loved son. Rahul, burdened by the presence of perfection, internalizes his struggles. Their father's eventual death leaves questions unanswered and wounds unhealed. A tragic reality for many sons who never figure out their fathers until it is too late. Death doesn't just take, it actually transforms. And in life, a father and son are often locked in a cycle of everyday happenings. But in death, all that remains is clarity, which is sometimes painful and sometimes profound. Ma Yau, directed by Lijujo Pellicheri, delves into the exact moment of reckoning where loss forces a son to confront not just grief but his father's entire existence. The film follows Ishi, a man who is trying to give his father Vavachan a grand, dignified burial, an act that should be simple but spirals into an absurd yet deeply tragic struggle. What should be a personal farewell becomes an ordeal shaped by bureaucracy, social judgment, and existential weight. The burden of arranging a funeral mirrors the emotional weight of a father's absence. What once felt like a complicated presence now becomes an unbearable void. The brilliance of Ma Yau lies in its understanding that grief is not just about loss, but about unfinished businesses. Ishi is forced to grapple with his father's imperfections in death, making the absence feel even heavier. This echoes the deep psychological truth: when a father is alive, he is a point of reference, whether through love, rebellion, or resentment. But in death, he becomes something else entirely, a mirror that forces the son to look at his own identity, regrets, and responsibilities. Now, since its release, Animal has been dissected from every possible angle. It is hyper-masculine, like the hyper-masculine aesthetic of the film, the operatic action sequences, commentary on violence, and the controversial gender dynamics. But amidst all this discussion, one major aspect strangely remains overlooked, and that is the very theme that the film promised from its inception: the story of a father and son carved in blood, a relationship that was carved in blood. The father-son relationship in Animal is a study in extremes: excessive devotion on one side, cold indifference on the other. Ranvijay does not merely love his father, Balbir. He worships him, shaping his entire identity around the pursuit of paternal validation. His love is raw, violent, and obsessive, manifesting through destruction rather than words. But for all his efforts, he is met with nothing but gets rationally called out by his father for being barbaric and monstrous instead of being beloved. Balbir is not a cruel father in the traditional sense. He is emotionally unavailable, a man so hardened that he cannot recognize the depth of his son's longing. This emotional neglect fuels Ranvijay's descent into brutality. He kills, destroys, and subjects himself to immense suffering, believing that the only way to gain his father's respect is to become the kind of man that his father understands, one that is defined by strength and fearlessness rather than vulnerability. But for a film that is so dedicated to building this psychological turmoil, Animal fumbles when it comes to closure. After all the hours of exploring the weight of Ranvijay's suppressed emotions, the resolution arrives too quickly and too cleanly. In a brief 7-minute confrontation, Ranvijay mimics his father's past behaviors to force him to understand his pain. And just like that, Balbir sees his son in a new light. This moment should have been the emotional crux of the film, a culmination of years of unspoken anguish, a battle of words as intense as the physical battle that preceded. Instead, it is treated as a narrative formality, a rushed reconciliation that undercuts the complexity of their relationship. Balbir's transformation from an emotionally detached father to a man who suddenly acknowledges his son's suffering feels abrupt, almost unearned. After a lifetime of silence, one outburst is enough to shift everything. The issue with Animal doesn't lie in its portrayal of pain, but in how quickly it moves past it. Father-son relationships built on years of emotional repression cannot just be resolved in 7 minutes. Some stories demand space for confrontation, for messy, uncomfortable dialogues, for the kind of conversations that don't end neatly with, neat resolutions. Animal sets up a deeply fractured dynamic but denies it the time that it needs to truly break open, leaving behind an ending that feels like healing and more like a necessary conclusion the film rushes to reach. For a film that sold itself on being a father-son story carved in blood, Animal ultimately leaves this wound only half explored. And with that, we arrive at the end of this video. So please do let me know in the comments what is your most memorable and most favorite portrayal of a father-son relationship in the history of Indian cinema. And of course, you can give more than one examples in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Do like, share and subscribe. And I'll be back soon with another video. Till then, my name is Parush and thank you so much for watching. Long live cinema.